thank you for joining us. A very big welcome to everybody, wherever you are in the world. This is the second of our 6 webinars live from COP27. And we're really pleased to have another round of passionate speakers with real views and the latest updates. And my goodness, so many updates coming through yesterday. So today our focus is on climate solutions. So why climate solutions? Because the world needs more solutions. We heard the message from Antonio Guterres on day one, how the world is so far behind in tackling climate change, and therefore we need more solutions, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So our speakers today, we've got Matt Mairinger, who's originally from Canada, who's live at COP27. Matt, thanks ever so much for joining us. And we've got Stephan Savarese, who's the president of Saving Our Planet, and who is based at the moment, I think you're in, well, tell us where you are, Stephan. Where are you?
I'm in Corsica.
In Corsica, super. So Matt, let's start with you. Do you want to tell us a bit about where you are? So where are you at COP27? What's in the background? What's going on around you? What's happening?
Okay. First, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
An alleyway here at COP27, which is in Sharm el-Sheikh. It's the 4th day here, so just lots going on. So if you've never been to COP before, there's side events, there's presidency events, there is pavilion events. For the nuclear presidents right now, we have the IEA pavilion, and today is actually Youth Day, so there's a big focus on youth, and there's actually a lot of focus on nuclear. So we have the Nuclear for Climate booth, we have a side pavilion, and we have, well.
Okay, so Matt, there's a little bit of a question with the sound. Do you have a microphone that you can use there?
Unfortunately, I do, but I don't think it works. So this is the best I have. It's yeah, it's action here.
Okay. Well, maybe you can just get quite near to the screen.
It was working when you tried it last time, Matt. Maybe you try it again.
Maybe if I turn off video, is that?
Yeah, that's much better.
Better?
Yeah. Okay, so Stephan, do you want us to give an introduction to yourself?
Yes, so I'm Stephen. I'm the co-founder of Saving Our Planet and No CO2 with Charles, and we've been working on this since COP21, in fact. And the last time I checked, there was a number that was given at COP, which is that the South, the developing countries, needed $1,200 billion per year to transition away from fossil fuels. And this number has been updated yesterday. Now it's 2 trillion per year. So I think this gives an idea of the size of the task, of the challenge that we have to undertake. We need to come up with climate solutions that can take all that available money, by the way. Clean tech and climate tech is the only expanding financing space this year. And but there are not enough projects in the developing countries, and in the other countries there is a good news. 20 countries have actually reduced CO2 emissions last year, but 180 haven't. So that also gives us an idea of the success rate of the COPs. It's 10%. It means we've been 10% successful at reducing GHG emissions.
Okay, so Matt, let's try again. Do you want to give us a sound check?
Is that any better? Any better now?
Yeah, that's better. Okay, let's go with that. So let's start off with the message that Antonio Guterres gave us on day one. This is the UN General Secretary said the world faced a stark choice. Either developed and developing countries working together to make a historic pact to reduce emissions, or failure, which would lead to climate breakdown and catastrophe. So Matt, what's your perspective on that? Is this, how is this this very, very powerful introduction that he gave, how is this shaping the nature of the discussions that you're seeing on the ground at COP27? Matt, I think we've lost you. Stephan, do you want to go, while we're waiting for Matt, do you want to give a perspective on the same question?
I was going to say, while we wait, Martin in the comment did say, is that 2 trillion for adaptation and mitigation?
Yeah, I'll send a link to the LinkedIn post that says that. Yeah, the money would be used really to reduce emissions and also manage the loss. So it'd be both for adaptation and mitigation, about 1 trillion each, in fact.
Okay, so we're waiting for we're now waiting for Matt to come back in due to the internet connection from Sharm el-Sheikh. So Stephan, do you want to give us a bit of an update on how you see where are we with spending some of this 2 trillion a year to get things moving? Where are we with this aspect of climate solutions?
Yeah, I've been listening to what the finance community is saying because I'm more of an engineer, so I'm really involved in developing climate solutions. But I'm always listening to the finance guys because they are the ones who decide what's going to be invested. And they've been very keen on renewables so far because in some parts of the world, renewables are the fastest way to reduce emissions. If you take some countries in Africa and Asia, their dependence on oil is really increasing really fast. And if you want to avoid these countries to develop just like the older countries have developed in the 20th century, then we need to provide them with a lot of low carbon power. And that's where wind, solar, and nuclear come into play because you don't have hydropower everywhere. And the latest trends have been also on habitat, which is adapting habitat to climate change so that we need less power to have more comfortable buildings, housing and offices and also industry. So you know, and then this year the energy crisis has compounded the problem, which is on top of the necessity to reduce the GHG emissions. You have the necessity to reduce your energy bills because energy has become more expensive. It's going to be the same in the near future about materials, about construction materials and industrial materials. The cost of energy in turn is making those materials more expensive, and the fact that some decent effort has been made on reducing the emissions of buildings in many countries makes reducing the emissions of materials manufacturing even more important now.
So Stephan, let's talk about this point that came up yesterday. So the Bloomberg are reporting that there's actually been a slump in investment in renewables, specifically in Africa. Now, obviously, this is a disappointment. A lot of money last year at COP26 was allocated to South Africa for action. There's so much more solar power potential in Africa than there is in Northern Europe. So again, this is a reason for making investments. Do you have any perspective on what's happening here? Why there is such a shortage of actually investment in real renewables projects in Africa?
No, I don't have the key answer to that. I think what's happening is that there are other priorities in those economies to develop, and clearly reducing GHG emissions has not been prioritized. I've even read some outrageous papers about how these countries should receive money without any commitment to reduce GHG emissions, and this is where the negotiations on the famous Article 6 of the Paris Agreement have stalled, which is if people want to receive money without any commitment, then the negotiations just stall. We really need to do a very strong, what we call climate diplomacy effort, which is that there has to be some trade, some trading, whether it's carbon credits or just country-to-country agreements. Basically, money cannot be sent without any commitments on the receiving party to spend this on low carbon technology rather than increasing their fossil fuel consumption, because otherwise we would obtain exactly the opposite of what we are trying to achieve, which is reducing GHG emissions. We cannot use green funds to build more oil and gas terminals or more coal power plants. Believe it or not, this is what has happened in the past.
Okay, so we got a message from Matt that he's struggling with the internet connection from Egypt. This is disappointing that despite all the planning, the fundamentals of communication with Egypt are still not in place, it seems. Rihanna, we've got our speaker Chigozie. Hopefully you'll be joining us in a minute. But in the meantime, Stephan, I know one of your favorite subjects is carbon trace. So they've launched this bombshell report yesterday in the middle of COP27, saying that basically the research they've done using satellite technology is that CO2 emissions and methane emissions from a lot of oil and gas plants across the world are much, much higher than expected. So Stephan, what's your take on this? What's this all about?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Yeah, sorry. The bombshell report yesterday from Carbon Trace saying that using satellite technology, that the emissions from oil and gas plants across the world, emissions of CO2 and methane, are potentially much higher than have been reported.
Yeah, it's at the same time a surprise and not a surprise. We kind of expected that. It's just that the number is much higher than what we anticipated. We thought that CO2 emissions would be underestimated by 50%, and now we find out it's 200%. So the situation is much worse than anticipated, and this is just more of the same. The story of climate change is exactly that. We think that we're going to have bad news, and then reality is even worse than what we can imagine. And this says a lot about the way we are taking this problem. We are far too optimistic and far too slow in addressing the issues. But the nice thing is in a few years, we make tremendous progress on knowledge. Okay. Now, how do we turn this knowledge into power? Because no, knowledge is power, but something has to happen in between. And how do we regain control of climate change? And this is the issue. And the key has been identified by Mr. John Kerry a few years ago, which is accountability. We need to really work on the accountability of governments, business, and international organizations towards climate change. This is the central topic of the Paris Agreement. Now we have the knowledge that says, okay, guys, get your act together because time is running out. We have spent 86% of the carbon budget to keep global warming under 2 degrees. Only 14% left. There are 10 years left to save the planet.
Okay.
Sorry, 8 years now. 8 years now.
Okay, so Matt seems to have a problem. So
we should thank Climate Trace for giving us this knowledge, because there is a lot of denial. So what Climate Trace is doing is really fighting the denial against this carbon budget issue.
So Stephan, a question came up on LinkedIn this morning. Do you think that any laws have been broken by what the oil producers have been doing here? Have they broken any laws?
No, I don't think. I think we must be reasonable. We cannot get rid of oil and gas overnight. So I don't think it's a problem for us to add some small extra capacity of oil and gas production in some countries. It's a very local topic. So should we use the oil reservoirs in Uganda and in Mozambique? I don't know. I think it's for the people to decide if they want to do it or not. And the only concern of the international community is that this should be done in a very responsible way, which is ESG, environmental and social governance. If high ESG standards are met at new oil and gas production facilities, then we should encourage that, because that will displace some less responsible oil and gas or coal mining.
Okay.
So I'm not supporting a view which is we should fight against business. We can win the climate change mitigation war only if business is helping. We cannot win against business. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, so Chigozie, big welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to unmute? We've had some problems with the internet from Sharm el Sheikh. Okay, so do you want to speak? Can we hear you? Hi. Do you want to? Can you hear us?
How is it now? Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. We can hear you.
I think it's better. Thank you so much. As you can imagine, I had a little bit of a hard time finding a quiet place.
Yeah, no problem.
In the COP venue.
No problem at all.
Yeah, but I hope there is not too much noise. Yeah.
No, it's all working well so far. Okay, so while it's working so well, if you'd like to unmute and tell us a little bit about. So what's your experience at COP27? How's it going so far for you?
It's been going well, as you see. I mean, as expected, of course, you have a lot of negotiations going on. This particular COP27 has, of course, become bigger than the last one. It seems that things, I mean, the scale of things, increase year after year. You also see in this particular presence of private sector. Sponsors, and also there are quite a presence of them here as well. So it sends a signal that there is an increased, activities around. People are increasingly being aware around climate. At the same time, the situation is tensed, as you can imagine, as a result of the crisis that is going on, and energy crisis is going high costs, and countries trying to find a way around it, and then pursuing trying to pursue energy security first. You also see a presence of quite a lot about alternatives, right? Alternatives regarding nuclear energy, for instance, as an alternative to achieve this energy security that is more climate friendly. To argue, there is also alternatives like green hydrogen, for instance. There are not focus about these things going into the future, right? But as you know, yesterday was also the Finance Day, so there's a lot of discussions regarding finance, and it brings also then back the question of what really then happened to the last promises that were made around finance.
Yeah. So Chigozie, you're a finance man yourself. So give us your perspective. So discussions that there were yesterday about finance. Do you want to give us a summary of what that was about?
Yeah, of course. When you talk about climate change, of course, whether it's addition, of course, not much can really be done without finance. You need to finance these activities. You need to provide finance in terms of incentives. You need to provide finance in terms of trying to close existing gaps with renewable energy options, other than with fossil fuel options. And of course, when it comes to developing countries that has so many other concerns other than climate change, but so many other ones, some of them more immediate. It's also then very good to be more pragmatic at that front. to then see in which ways there can be more support, right? I mean, this things has been discussed in the previous COPs, and of course you've had a lot of promises. In fact, this particular COP was tagged the COP for implementation. And so people are kind of like then looking forward to begin to see things on the ground as far as financing is concerned. Yeah, that's more or less it.
So what about there's been a lot of discussion before COP about the $100 billion a year that's been promised by developed countries. So the story seems to be that the so far only about 82 billion a year has been found. So is there any update on this? Is there an expectation that the $100 billion will be achieved, Chigozie?
Well, of course, this money was a pledge, right? So it was not like given in cash. Of course, there still has to be a lot of discussions on which mechanisms needs to be in place in order to channel this money properly to the countries that would need them. Of course, there's a lot of concerns about scale, a lot of concerns about transparency, concerns about public commitment as well as from the government side, to actually effectualize this funding. And of course, there are also talks kind of in the background about, the sufficiency of this fund. Yeah, the US, John Kerry mentioned, of course, that the funding that is being promised, just about 60% chance of reaching, securing the 1.5 degrees that is really, the goal here. But it's also a question, as you've mentioned. I mean, what can we do with the one that is now available, and how can we show, that the one that is available is also being put to use? But I can tell you that it's one thing to promise financing, or for this financing to be available, and then it's another thing to have the mechanisms in place to be able to channel this financing in a proper place. And sometimes setting up these mechanisms take time and could be bureaucratic. In setup, and I think that this can also be improved by making things less bureaucratic and making sure that there is a more direct link to this money and increasing transparency.
Sure. Okay. So do you have a sense of where this money is going? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about the money being short, but there seems to be a lot less discussion in the news about actually what is happening to the money. Do you know where the $80 billion a year that's been raised? Do you have a sense of where this is going? What countries it's going to? What it's being spent on? These sort of questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not been a lot of information out there concerning the particular channels of where it's, which countries doing what. What is mainly there, for instance, is some of the mechanisms that are there. Some of them are already existing, right? Like the Clean Technology Fund. I mean, I think most of them will really still go through certain mechanisms. And of course, there was also the talk about creating a new accelerating co-transition investment program. Of course, this then particularly has to do with South Africa. If you know, I mean, there was quite some promise on that angle to kind of, for South Africa, for instance, particularly to receive some funding to help them go through, the phases of transition. But, we have to also note, to be fair, that a lot of things has quite happened between then and now. I mean, a lot of things that we are not predicted. I mean, the war happened kind of in between, the last pledge and now, a lot of changes has been done. But I think that in the future, it will be good to just, these were just some examples. It will be good to have more information, even online, on how the channels through which this financing is going. But if the mechanisms are clear, and the countries that are supposed to receive the larger chunks of the money are also aware of it, and making plans within their own countries to prepare to receive them, right?
Sure,
But
sure.
yeah.
Okay, so another question for you, Chigozie. It's come up in the overnight in the news. So Bloomberg are reporting that there's been a slump in investment in renewables in Africa. So they're saying that in the whole of last year, 2021, only $2.6 billion was spent on renewable energy in the whole of Africa. So just wondered if you've got a take on this. I mean, obviously in Africa, there's a lot of potential for solar, also maybe for biomass as well. Just wondered what your perspective is on what's been happening here. Is there any particular reason why things are slowed down in Africa?
Yeah, of course. Although, as you know, the African continent also has a lot of potentials for renewables in terms of solar, wind, hydro, and then you have also a lot of potentials for more to be done concerning its leveraging, right? So and of course now you also have quite huge concerns about energy security itself. I mean, and this is really conflicting then with the options of renewables. I mean, there are quite a lot of progress on the renewables ground. I mean, countries like Kenya, for instance, has a lot of potentials for that. And, for instance, in Kenya, more than 80% of the installed capacity is from renewables. And so there are quite improvements on that ground, but there are then also questions on, what then happens with energy security, energy access generally. Okay. And
so in Kenya, is that mainly solar or mainly wind, or what is it?
It's a combination of geothermal, hydro, wind, and some solar, but mainly geothermal. Yeah, so
geothermal.
Yeah, so,
wow.
so that's yeah.
Okay, that's really
when we talk of renewables, I think it's also quite important to be aware of other types of renewable energy sources other than just wind and solar.
Yeah. Okay. So look, we're coming to the end of the time now. So Stephan, over to you. What's your perspective on how things are going so far at COP27, and what else do we need to make people aware of?
Yes. So we are always waiting for the COP of solution. That was the nickname of COP22, and we haven't seen that. In fact, I think that all the people who are going to the COPs every year, or almost every year, are dreaming of a COP where we would be able to say, okay, these are the solutions, deployment has started, we have started curbing emissions, and we can actually save the carbon budget, which is the objective. Because if you go beyond the carbon budget, then you end up with runaway climate change, which is uncontrollable. So to regain control, what we need to do is to come up with a realistic plan, country by country, but also at the international level. There are 196 parties plus the European Union, so about 200 countries overall. And out of those 200 countries, only a few have a long-term strategy which phases out fossil fuels before 2050, even though things are evolving, and that's a good sign. And then the other problem that we have is that even for those countries which have a strategy, they are running into huge implementation issues, which is that they are running behind or not meeting their targets. And this is due to the fact that there is a lack of alignment between the parties on what a good strategy is. There is also a lack of precision in the estimation of GHG emissions, and that's what Climate Trace is starting to fix. And then we need to really realize that it's a big planet. So solutions which are efficient at one location are not efficient in another location. Then you have politics. People have a choice, and I think that the purpose of the COPs, of the COP of solution, will be to provide clarity on what each technology and each mitigation measure can do to really curb the emissions. And on top of that, you have all the adaptation and climate justice issues, which are making the problem more complex, but we should consider them separately. So,
well, I have to say, Stephan, that as an activist, as a citizen of the world, I find it quite incredible that 7 years after the Paris Agreement, you're saying that still there's a need for realistic plans country by country, because for me this is so basic. This should have been done in 2016 after the Paris Agreement, but it hasn't been done. But anyway,
the COP leaders have been saying it now since Glasgow, that we need stronger commitments. The commitments right now end up with over plus 2.5 degrees of global warming. This is not acceptable. All the countries must do a better job of really showing the will to solve the problem. We have 180 countries which are simply not showing the will that they actually want to solve the problem. Everybody is saying, yes, we're going to solve it. But when you ask them, okay, what are you going to do?
You're sounding like Antonio Guterres here. Right, I'm going to just make a comment about the about carbon removal, and then over to Chigozie to give a summary and close for us. But just wanted to say that an announcement that caught my eye today is around a project by Restore Africa, which is about carbon removal in Africa on community land. And so the countries we're talking about are Kenya, Ethiopia, Malawi, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. And there's potential for 1.5 million hectares, and this would potentially benefit 1.4 million households. So some real potential here for carbon removal, carbon credits on community-owned land in these countries. So I'm positive about that. So Chigozie, over to you for your summary, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the discussion has to continue, and as this COP was themed the COP for implementation, I think that's also where we need to put our heads now. There's been a lot of discussions going on. It needs to be implemented. We need to also try to overcome the current shock in the energy sector, in the energy prices, and try to solve the current loopholes with renewable energy options, and of which gets cost effective as time goes on. There are also a lot of innovative ways to do so. More recently, so many innovative, futuristic ways have been proposed, and I think it's also good to look into them as well to see what kind of potentials they hold. And I think that all countries has to be carried along as well in this movement, so that no region is left behind. So that it's a kind of combined effort. Thank you.
Okay, that's important. So Chigozie, thank you for joining us from COP27. Thank you, Stephan. Thank you to Rihanna and Gary for the technology at this end. Big disappointment to the COP27 organizers for such a poor bandwidth from there to the rest of the world. But anyway, we can't.
There is still 1 week to go.
That's the problem. We can't solve that. So thanks ever so much. Thanks to our audience here for the questions, to everybody for the insights into this. And we're going to look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. I don't know how we're going to be placed tomorrow with the communication links. I don't know what we're going to do, but maybe but anyway, we've got a really, really interesting session again, talking about nature-based solutions. And Martin is just telling us something. Oh, right. Okay, Martin. So Martin's saying there's going to be climate justice marches in the UK on Saturday. Okay, so we are expecting some quite good weather, some warm weather in the UK. So that's a good reason for people to get out there into central London, be part of those marches, and to
Charles, funny enough, Rihanna was affected by demonstrations just this morning. Getting here, a 45-minute journey took nearly 3 hours. So Rihanna still managed to get tuned in. So there's demonstrations all over London.
Wow. Well, there you are. Maybe that bicycle is important after all. So thanks again, everybody. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you. Goodbye.